Hi folks, welcome to the weekend once more. Does anyone feel like this year is going past really fast? Talking of things going by really fast, I'm making rapid progress through my planned TBR for August, and with that in mind, let's take a look at what I've been reading this week. I finished Eastern Standard Tribe by Cory, Doctorow, one of his earlier books from about 20 years ago. Apparently it was conceived in a writing workshop, and that maybe shows a little bit. It's a work of committee. That said, it moved along very quickly. I listened to an audiobook read by the author himself. It's set about 20 years in the future, so about now, in fact. Art is a user experience expert, always looking at how people actually interact with systems. He exists in a world where loyalty to one's country is diminishing, at least in some circles, to be replaced by loyalty to the time zone that you choose to spend in. And in Art's case, it's the Eastern Standard Tribe. He is based in London, though, effectively working undercover as an industrial saboteur to make a large corporation based in Greenwich Mean Tribe less efficient by proposing ridiculous and yet plausible changes to UX and related processes. Doctorow predicts a world dominated by personal comms units, which sounds a lot like an amped up smartphone. Ubiquitous now, of course, but worth noting that this book was published 3 years before the launch of the first iPhone. Art is not an especially likeable character, and his girlfriend Linda is spectacularly and amusingly volatile. The plot switches between the current, with a development of a business idea between Art, Linda and another friend, and the future, with Art stranded on the roof of a mental health institute, an insane asylum, a Kafkaesque situation from which there appears to be no escape. Those plot threads converge in a satisfying conclusion. This was my first Cory Doctorow book. It has shades of cyberpunk about it, but I think he's mostly concerned with the world of next week, how technology and technologists might shape that for good or for ill. My socks were not blown off by Eastern Standard Tribe by any means, but I am interested to read more of his stuff. With that book being such a quick read, I added in a bonus book, John Wyndham's The Chrysalids, which I also listened to on audiobook, and it fit almost perfectly into quite an epic long run last Saturday. So it was done in a single sitting, or rather running, if you like. This is a book that I've read several times over the years, and it might be my favourite Wyndham novel. It skews a little bit YA, possibly, in today's terms, at least at first, but I think that's just because the protagonists are children when we first meet them, and they naturally have a child's perspective. They have some rapid growing up to do, so the book does become darker as it progresses. Written in the mid-1950s in the post-war gloom of Britain, with Cold War tensions ratcheting up, The Chrysalids imagines a world hundreds of years after a cataclysmic event, the Tribulation, in which much of the world is left a wasteland. Wyndham gives us grim glimpses of the devastation during the story. Charred cities, plains of black glass where nothing lives, badlands on the margins where mutations make life almost unrecognisable. And where life does exist in Labrador, the location of this novel, is agrarian and run on strict God-fearing lines. Mutations are not tolerated, whether it's in crops or livestock or even humans. They are offences and abominations and must be dealt with. The story follows David, ostensibly a normal lad, who meets a girl, Sophie, who it quickly transpires has more than the usual godly number of toes. And thus begins a slow cascade of trouble for David and his new friend, plus his sister Petra, and a group of friends it didn't ought to be possible for David to have, separated as they are by many miles. I have a deep love for this book. It was one that I read a lot as a teenager. With a mature reading, the ending is somewhat preposterous if you think about it too deeply, but back in the day I thought it was marvellously exciting. Wyndham, in his rather understated way, does a great job of painting this strange world with its rules and observations, its dogma and unrelenting harshness. The characters are highly engaging, the story moves along at a good pace, and if you are yet to read any John Wyndham, I think this is a great place to start. In actual book, I finished Ascent by Jed Mercurio, who's better known here in the UK as a TV screenwriter of pacey thrillers such as Line of Duty. Ascent follows Yevgeny Yeremin, who from young boy to flying ace to hero of the Soviet Union to non-person to secret cosmonaut. This is the Soviet version of Tom Wolfe's Right Stuff. The first half or so of the book tells of Yevgeny's time as a Soviet fighter pilot in the Korea War, the last of the dogfight battles with up-close and personal guns, not standoff missiles, still the principal way to down an enemy aircraft. The scenes of those dogfights seem realistic enough to me, but it's more a story of Yevgeny's development as a pilot, his demonstration of superior skills, dealing with the jealousy that causes within his squadron. There's an inevitable fall from grace with Yevgeny sent off to a remote Soviet airbase in the Arctic on the oddly named Graham Bell Island. The second half of the book is the space race, Soviet style, as they throw everything at trying to beat the Americans to the moon. Ascent weaves an alternate history from hints, myths and conspiracy theories that emerged from the highly secretive Soviet space program. And in this alternate history, one or two events go differently and the history of space exploration is rewritten. Or is it? Over the years, I've read a bunch about the US space program, which culminated in the Apollo missions, but this is the first time that I've got any details, albeit fictional probably in this case, of the mirror image Soviet program. Now, I enjoyed my time in this book. Arguably it's barely science fiction, and only because of the tweaks made to certain events. It was nonetheless an engaging read. The prose is clear and direct as you might expect from a TV screenwriter. There's no messing about. If you can track down a copy and you're interested in the space race era, then I definitely recommend this as a quick, satisfying read. From Soviet-era rocketry, next we go to Faster Than Light Submarines with Ken MacLeod's Beyond the Hallowed Sky. MacLeod imagines a world in which faster-than-light travel is not only possible, but has been put to practical, if secret, use for 50 years since the 2020s. As is often the case in a MacLeod book, the geopolitics are quite different to today's world, with three main power blocks. The Alliance is basically the Anglophone world, including India, but without Scotland or Ireland, which are now part of the Union, an evolution of the present European Union, and the Coordinated States, or COORD, which is the Russians and the Chinese and the associated satellite states. The book opens with a Union scientist based in England who receives an airmail letter in her own handwriting which postulates faster-than-light travel. It seems to add up, she's shocked to find, and she gets busy publishing a scientific paper. This attracts the attention of those who would rather that this knowledge is suppressed, and she has to do a runner to Scotland. Ken MacLeod lives in Gorok, which is on the coast. From his writing desk, he can see passing submarines as they go to and from the nearby Faslane naval base. And as I was reading this, I was amused to think of him staring out the window and thinking, do you know what? Those would make excellent spaceships. The joy of being an author of fiction, especially science fiction, I imagine, is that the implausible can be made real by the stroke of a pen. One of the ensemble cast is an engineer by trade, and he's out birdwatching or something, and through his binoculars he observes a submarine lift out of the water and disappear in a blue flash. What the actual fuck, he thinks. And from there comes the suspicion that the pesky Alliance may already have faster-than-light travel and are using subs to do it. And that all happens very early in the book, and there's much more science fiction joy to follow. There's an exploratory mission on Apis, an Earth-like world with compatible wildlife and very familiar bees. Earth bees. There are hostile, or are they, alien relics, a space station floating in the dense atmosphere of Venus, of all places, and yes, frickin' nuclear submarines in space. I really enjoyed myself reading this. It's by some distance the most enjoyable book I've read of his, and I'm really looking forward to reading the following books in the Lightspeed trilogy. It was great fun. Just in the last half an hour or so, I finished The Day of the Triffids, another Wyndham book on audiobook. I've read this many times before. Somewhat belittled as a cosy catastrophe, I think, by Brian Aldiss, it holds up remarkably well 60 years later. Triffids was amongst the first science fiction books that I ever read, age 10 or 11, I think. Bill Mason wakes up in hospital, eyes bandaged after treatment for a mild Triffid sting, to find that the world has changed dramatically. If you've seen 28 Days Later or the first episode of The Walking Dead TV show, they both borrow heavily from John Wyndham. In fact, the Triffids are a good replacement for zombies, a botanical precursor of this subgenre, perhaps. Anyway, there is a cosmic display of lights in the sky which renders all who see it blind. Bill quickly finds that he's in a tiny minority of sighted people and things quickly go south. This is a story of the breakdown of things, of difficult decisions, questions of relative worth, who to save and who to leave to die. A small group survive. The Triffids, moving 7-foot plants that can kill a man with a whip-like stinger, become a major problem. To make things worse, they increasingly exhibit a herd-like intelligence, and plans must be made to deal with them once and for all. Whilst there is a good deal of death and destruction in this book, that does mostly happen off stage, and the focus is on our plucky survivors. Like the Chrysalids, this was also written by Wyndham in the aftermath of World War II. Memories of war still very vivid in this country, and Cold War paranoia on the rise. Wyndham inserts some cautionary elements into the story, lessons, if you like, for the grandchildren of the survivors to learn. I very much enjoyed rereading this book, and the audio presentation was pretty good as well. I've also made a start on Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed, which I'm not exactly flying through, but I am intrigued. I will definitely be finishing it. So that was a pretty good week for me. What have you been reading this week? Is there anything that you'd recommend? Do let me know in the comments. I definitely don't have enough books to read. All right, well, that's clearly not true, but I am always happy to add to my long-range TBR mountain. Channel stuff next. Subscribers are at 3,059, which is up 14 on last week. If you're one of those 14, or if you found me for the first time today, a huge welcome to you all. I'm John, and I focus on reading, collecting and chatting about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week this week was from Ant, who responded to my book haul video the other day, which featured a John Wyndham short story collection. It's a very nice Nesfa Press edition, in fact. Ant confesses that he's never heard of John Wyndham, and my initial response was, wow, really? You've never heard of John Wyndham? But then I immediately caught myself, as I've been in exactly that position many times the last couple of years. Since starting this channel, I've been repeatedly amazed to find that there are well-known authors that I've never heard of. And one of the joys of my increased focus on science fiction has been just that discovery process. And also said that he's made a start on The Kraken Wakes, one of John Wyndham's better-known books that I only read for myself for the first time this year. With over 100 years of science fiction as we know it behind us now, there are many, many wonderful authors and books to discover, and I shall continue to explore, sharing with you all as I do. One of the other joys of doing this YouTube lark is the comments. So thank you to Ant for commenting, and to all of you that do. It's always great to hear from you, and I very much appreciate it. Let's take a quick look at what was on the channel this week. On Sunday, there was a video of apparently niche appeal, taking a closer look at my collection of Ken MacLeod books. Ken was a friend and contemporary of Ian Banks and has been writing for almost 30 years. I give a brief overview of each book or series, avoiding spoilers. If you're not familiar with his work, it's definitely worth checking out that video to see what takes your fancy. I think he has a nice variety of work, from space opera to more earthbound, near-future tales, and there are some series and some singletons too. On Tuesday, there was August's book haul, which has the usual eclectic mix of potluck, in-the-wild finds, online impulse purchases, and some books that I've been hunting for a while, plus some new books that I bought for new book money. Talking of buying books, I seem to have accumulated 7 more books since recording that haul video, 6 of them legit finds in a charity shop, including a very nice Robert Silverberg first edition in hardback. On the booktube front this week, I watched Whitney's video on what science fiction has to say on the Fermi paradox. If there are so many aliens out there, where the heck are they? I was particularly interested in this as I did a similar video a few months back. Whitney refers to some of the same books that I did, but there's a lot more that I didn't cover. I enjoy a themed video like this, and it's well worth a watch if you're looking for some book suggestions. Also this week, I've had a little chuckle watching The Book Rapport this week, who's posted a few videos poking some gentle fun at some bigger booktubers, some of whom you might recognise. He uses scenes from the 2001 Space Odyssey movie as a backdrop, giving them a different dialogue, and I think it's pretty funny. I'll put links to those in the description as usual. On my channel this week, there will be a look at some of the high points of science fiction from the 1960s. I have that written, but I still need to record and edit it and so on, so I'm not sure when that will arrive exactly. Possibly Sunday, but I think more likely during the week at some point. In theory, if I actually read any of them, there might also be a look at the short stories that I've read from the 1970s and a look at the picks to come from the 1980s, all part of my recently declared Life Story Reading Challenge. I wouldn't hold your breath on that one, however. That might well slip out to the following week. Looking forward beyond the next week, I want to do some more themed videos, and I have a couple of ideas that I've been thinking through this week that I'm excited about. And if you have any ideas along those lines, a theme that you might like me to cover, do let me know and I'll add to the list. I also have a couple of author interviews lined up, but those will likely be in September. I'm really looking forward to speaking both of those authors. I think they'll be very different. And sorry for being such a tease, I will reveal who they are when the plans are a little bit more solid. Reading wise, I shall finish The Dispossessed in the next couple of days, I think. And on audiobook, I'm almost out of Spotify jail, so I shall pick up Surface Detail again and get that finished. In actual book, I'm looking forward to reading Chris Beckett's Beneath the World, a Sea. And I have short stories, as I mentioned, that I'm overdue with, so I'll spend some time on those in the coming week. After all of that, for my planned TBR pile for this month, I just have Clarke's Hammer of God left, which was a slightly underwhelming pick by the Decision Dice of Destiny. And many of you have warned me that it's a tedious read, so I'm seriously contemplating replacing it with a recent purchase, maybe more than one, since I think I have some room to spare this month. We shall see. That'll probably be a conversation for this time next week. As always, thank you for watching. Have a fabulous weekend, and until next time, goodbye for now.